Hi, welcome to the third gathering relating to the education of our congregation as to the strategic initiative by way of background. And shortly, um, we participated in a presentation on a report of all the data and the interviews and the things that we gathered in the Vitality Report earlier in the month. We met last Sunday and we had a presentation from Cameron Trimble, who is our contact with the organization called Convergence. And she informed us substantively and carefully about the trends in the country with regard to mainline churches and church attendance and health and things like that. And this is the final installment of the education process. And today, Cameron will take us through some of the energy that has been applied by creative um, churches in the face of these trends to give us both legs and an understanding of some of the things that other folks have done. Before I turn it over to Cameron, who's joining us via Zoom, I would like to do two things. First thing is I would like to tell you that I was struck today, and I want to re-emphasize it again with the idea that God delights when we are creators of justice and joy. That's what we will do, and that's what we have done. Secondly, we're asking God to be part of this process, and so I'd ask you to pray with me. Dear Lord, we honor and give our thanks for 150 years of ministry and service. As we turn to look forward into the sun, the wind, and the stars, help us to understand that you, God, are not limited by our plans or even our imagination, and that what will come from us will be yours when we open ourselves completely to your Spirit. We offer our prayers to you, who are able to accomplish far beyond what we might ask or imagine through your power at work among us. Amen. And I'm going to turn it over to you, but first I'm going to tell everybody that I brought saltwater taffy. And I'm leaving the cover on because it has all the flavors on there. And it's fresh. And I had it last night. And so pass that around. And then you take responsibility as to whether or not your teeth and things can handle it. I make no representations about that. Cameron, are you there?
I am.
Welcome.
I'm missing out on taffy.
Well, we'll take care of you.
Excellent. Well, I hope you all enjoy. It's great to be with you all again. Thank you for this opportunity. And whoever is running the Zoom background, I will need to be able to share my screen if you can just grant permission for that. So I trust that you all have had a wonderful morning. And now we get to nerd out about congregations and congregational life. And today's the hope for today is that we actually look at what's going on in some other congregations, not because we want to go copy what they're up to, but because we want to be provoked, inspired, urged to deeper creativity about what's possible in your space. So what I've tried to do is pick just some case studies. I could have picked 30 of them. I really actually had a very hard time choosing for you all. But I wanted to pick some that I think can integrate with what you're already up to and maybe give you some different kinds of ideas and different ways of thinking about this. And let's see if I've got power. Yes, yes. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and just need verification that you all can see it before I keep going here. Yes, great. Okay, very good. All right, so I've been the pastor of 4 different congregations. I've been in ministry now formally for nearly 25 years. And churches often call our organization and say, you know, we really need help with vision and mission. We need to focus in, we need to figure out our unique offer. We need to all get on the same page with a sense of shared direction, how we're moving. I used to do that work with congregations, but in pastoring these churches and walking this way of life that is, you know, what it means to be Christian, it's people of the way. I keep coming back to this is really a very simple enterprise, a simple idea that that Jesus and the Spirit and God have given us that we've made pretty busy and complex. As Bishop Yvette Flunder of City of Refuge and the Fellowship for Affirming Ministry says, she says, you know, we've become the most meetingest people. Like we really like to meet and administer and you know, build pretty complex structures. But at the heart of what we're up to, what church is at its most base form, is a place of fellowship where we can love and honor one another, we can teach and learn from each other, and that we are kind and compassionate to one another, encourage one another, and love one another, right? And then because we are in community together, becoming more kind, compassionate humans, the byproduct of that internal development is that we go out and serve the community, that we because of this transformation in our own being, we become the hands, mouth, and feet of this gospel story, the story of love and kindness and compassion. That's what Jesus taught us to do, was to care for the poor, the oppressed, and the ignored. And so when we think about what is the mission of the church, I've never found a better one than Micah 6:8. I mean, what are we to do? We are to uh, do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. I mean, that's it. That's ultimately what we're called to do. And we can do that at the scale of our choosing. So you can be a tiny little congregation and do this this work that Jesus has called us to. Or you can be a larger congregation, as you all are, and you can do this. And it's a matter of how we go about it. And is the way that we're going about it life-taking, or is it exhausting and depleting because we're trying to over administrate ourselves, which is, I think, a real challenge right now in a lot of our congregational systems. I bring this up because sociologist Margaret Wheatley, who is one of the founding thinkers of emergence leadership, she's been in the business world for a gazillion years, and she's a practicing Buddhist and is now really working more in the spiritual space. But years ago, when I was studying with her, she gave an image that I thought was so true to our lived experience at this moment in human history. She says that our world is functioning like a centrifuge. And that is that the speed at which we're all living and moving and having our being is so fast that as like a centrifuge separates particles intended to be together, but it separates them by the force of speed, right? And so the way that we're living right now, as we talked about in our last session, is at such an accelerated pace that it is threatening to fracture the very essence of what it means to be a conscious being, you know, and we're seeing that fracturing happening in our creating a global environmental crisis. We're seeing it in our propensity towards violence and war. We're seeing it in the ways in which our political systems, economic systems, et cetera, are fracturing, right? So there's something about the way that we're working isn't working, and we're seeing that in congregational life too. I think that this matter, I wanted to start with it because it's a condition in which we are now innovating in congregational life, right? So as we talk about what all these other congregations are doing, there's also a deeper level of awareness that I think we have to hold in ourselves, that actually doing more is not really the answer that we need. And in fact, Professor Andy Root, who is a professor at Luther Seminary and has written a lot of different books on church in the secular age and congregations in the secular age, et cetera. He points to the work of a Norwegian sociologist who helped us, or helped kind of point out what is obvious about current life in the world, not just in North America. But it's basically, we've built all of our systems, including church, mainline church, on this idea of if you put in more into the system, then you get out an increase, or you have an increased return on investment, in a sense. So at the baseline in our economics, if we put in money and commodities, we get more money, right? So that's the basis of capitalism, a system in which we live. In higher education, if you have knowledge and resources, then you get more knowledge, right? So you combine these things, you get more of it. In church, what we've been taught, what we're inheriting, the model that we're inheriting is if you have members and programs, then you get more members. So you take your members, you add in programs, it should result in more members. Or another way of thinking about it is if you wisely invest your resources and you're relevant to the current context, then it should result in more people. But it isn't resulting in more people in more and more cases. What it is resulting in is burnout. And that's a real challenge for us at a very large systemic level, because we are the inheritors of systems that demand that kind of endless growth, that kind of endless consumption, that kind of find the new sexy senior pastor, or guy with a wife and young kids to come in. You all are really behind the ball on that one. I mean, Elizabeth, good luck on that. Or we find the perfect youth director, because if we can find a young person to come in and lead our kids, then obviously it's going to grow, right? So there's this impulse towards acceleration, which is actually burning out our people in our congregations. There's a danger actually of us getting that out of balance. So the tension is that we want to be an exciting and vital church, but we fear that that actually means more acceleration, right? That means we need more people, we need to be doing more things, and that's fine if that's sustainable for you. But there is a point in which systems develop to the point where they hit a ceiling, and most of mainline Christianity right now, institutionally speaking, is kind of at that tipping point. Now, let me deepen the thought, and then I'll talk about where we go from there. We talked about last week that what we're often experiencing at the base level, at the individual level, is that, again, the pace at which we're moving, the kind of demands that are placed upon us, the insecurities that we're holding as far as our financial well-being, our political well-being, et cetera, are creating a break in our ability to respond to the challenges that we're facing. So we're seeing that at scale, and the levels of mental health challenges, the level of self-medication that's happening right now, the level of people just checking out and not able to function in healthy ways in culture. And what Andy Root would say is that what that leads to ultimately is a sense of alienation, disintegration, and erosion of our internal sense of being and our external systems. So that's what we don't want, right? And then we're of course seeing that at global scale. We're seeing that we're now facing challenges that are kind of beyond our ability to address in any kind of joined up way. And the symptoms of that are this increased sense of alienation, disintegration, and erosion. So you might think that if you wanted to avoid alienation, erosion, and disintegration, that we should just simplify, we should slow down, we should not be so consumerist driven. And that might be true, except that our whole culture is built on this obsession with growth. So going slower actually doesn't work, because it ends up destabilizing. If you're living in a culture that's constantly obsessed with acceleration, when you decelerate, it actually messes with the dynamic stabilization of the system. So we're at this really awkward time where we all know that this is not a great way to be church. This isn't a great way to be business. This isn't a great way to be family. It's not a great way to be in a political space. But we have not yet, as a culture, figured out the next thing. And so what do we do with that in the faith space? Because what I don't want to suggest, and the reason I wanted to spend time on this as we open up, is that you all need to do more. That actually, I don't think is the solution to how we move forward as a people. What I think we need to do is focus in on the only working antidote at the moment in the spiritual space that that I think is actually at the heart of our deepest craving of what it means to be human. You remember Joseph Campbell said that in his work as a mythologist and a philosopher and a psychologist, etc., he said that in his experience, it wasn't that people were actually seeking a meaning of life. They were seeking the feeling of being alive. That there's something about what we crave at our deepest level is a sense, an embodied sense, an incarnational sense of being interdependent, deeply connected to all that is. That we talk about those kinds of experiences as ones of sacred experience, where we feel God, where we touch God, where we touch the sacred. Annie Dillard had this wonderful quote that on a Sunday morning, we totally undervalue what we're doing. We pacify the experience, or we water it down when we're actually invoking the sacred. I mean, we should be wearing life preservers and seat belts in the pews, and having safety gear in place, because if we actually succeeded in provoking or creating the context in which we had an experience of the living God in our midst, it would be transformational. It would be extraordinary. It would take our breath away. And that's what I think we're longing for. And so what we're actually best situated as people of faith to offer is as an antidote to treat the condition of alienation, erosion, and disintegration in this context, is actually creating space, slowing down just enough, opening up just enough, tuning one's eyes and ears just enough, so that we are constantly in pursuit of experiences of awe, wonder, and transcendence. That's ultimately, when we think about the purpose of church, when we think about the value of congregational life, when we think about Micah 6:8, what we're really trying to do is to position ourselves, posture ourselves, so that we can sense and tune into the movement of the Holy Spirit that is present that has been present, is present now, and will always be present to us, should we be able to open ourselves to that reality. So that's what we're in pursuit of, right? So I don't want to throw a bunch of ideas on the wall and then say, let's go do a lot of things. What I'm actually wanting us to seek together, which requires a certain fine tuning of our discernment muscles, are experiences we could invest in together that create the space for all transcendence and wonder to enter in regularly into each of our lives, in a way that actually heals us, and that ultimately, I think, heals the planet. So in this way, we start to think about congregations not as just social clubs, which some congregations are guilty of, or not as, places that we come to see our friends and have, in the crudest sense, one could say one parades Jesus out for a Broadway show every Sunday, right? So it's not performative based or transactional in experience, but congregations are in meaningful ways schools of love. It's places where we can come, where we can promise that in community together we become kinder and more loving and more compassionate human beings by our being together. So we learn to love. We come to learn about love in a congregation. Wouldn't it be nice if we could be count onable for that? That would be the promise we could make to culture, that by being present in this place, you will become wiser and kinder and more at peace with yourself. One of the congregations doing this really well that I love working with them is this little congregation called the Way Collective out in Santa Monica, California. They started actually as a kind of a post-evangelical rejects group. So a lot of them grew up in evangelicalism and found that theology was really quite a violent experience for them, and it was incongruent to what they really believed. And so they set about saying, okay, so mainline Christianity doesn't feel quite right either. So how do we actually create what feels most in tune and feels most authentic and most honest in our experience of reading the text and of being community together and of studying from wisdom teachers throughout history. And so they take nothing for granted. They're very thoughtful about the culture that they're building. And in a way, they've become kind of a contemplative community. They take the internal spiritual development of the individual, they center that, and then realize that it's from that centering that then their actions in the world are animated or are energized. But that centered self is the powering space within them. So they have these practices and values that they use to talk about this. So practice the way of connection because we value belonging. We practice the way of curiosity because we value mystery. We practice the way of collaboration because we value healing justice, the way of creativity, the way of consciousness, the way of compassion, because we value beauty, wisdom, and love. I love the integration of that. Another way they talk about this is that complicit religion, as they describe it, or the religion that all of us want to reject, that we say no to, but we sadly see too many times on our news screens, is a religion that is built around the idea of coercion, confinement, certainty, colonization, conformity, and consumption. But they say we don't want to be that way. We reject that way of being religious community, and instead we want the values that we have listed over here to be the driving force of our culture. So they are so in tune with the way that they are with each other, the practices that they share with one another, that those get embodied in whatever activities they're up to, right? So it doesn't actually matter to them whether they're studying, doing a book study on the mystics, or they're out protesting and some injustice that's happening in their community. It doesn't matter if they're holding a lecture. It doesn't matter if they're feeding people, etc. There's a conscious awareness of the way of life to which they are committed, almost like a Catholic or a Catholic order kind of commitment, a way of being present to one another, driven by these values. That I just think, gosh, what a great way to build trusting, loving community. And that's the very thing that's missing so often in our culture today. Another example of that in a different kind of expression is St. Lydia's Dinner Church in Brooklyn, New Jersey. This is Emily Scott. She was the founding pastor of this congregation. She's not been there for a few years, but the idea was that Emily was living in Brooklyn, and she realized that the only place that people could get together for meals and for community building were in restaurants, because no one had homes big enough. They live in closets, bless them. So there was no space for the kind of community building that she wanted to do as a pastor. And so she got the idea that, what if we created a dinner church? And so it went through a few iterations, but ultimately they ended up in the storefront space. It was beautifully designed. And I would, when I was teaching in New York, I would take students there and get the feel of it. And so what happens is, when you walk in the door, somebody is there to greet you. Often it was Emily, and you would be given immediately a job and a friend. Now, if you think about any community to which you've joined and stayed, that's been the magic sauce, right? The minute you come in, if you're given a job that's meaningful, not just busy work, but you're given a job and then you're given an immediate connection, you're far more likely to stay connected to that community. This is how we grow congregations. You give people a job and you give them a friend. That's how they come back and stay. So immediately you come in and she's handing you a broom, or you can set the table, or in my case, because I showed up so frequently, she handed me the toilet bowl cleaner and I got to clean the bathrooms. Very special. You could be setting out bulletins. There were dozens of jobs that could be done, and you would do those with other people in that little space that they had. Now, they did have 3 people in the congregation that could actually cook. So you weren't given cooking jobs because, ultimately we wanted to eat edible food that tasted good and that wouldn't kill us. So that set of jobs was kind of isolated in a group that had certain skills, but the rest of us got to scrub toilets and set up tables, etc. And so then when it was time to gather, we would gather in a circle, and they ended up having to have multiple seatings or services here because the space, could only hold so many. And it would open up with like a Gregorian chant kind of beginning, of simple music that kind of was uh, um, it, in the Gregorian chant tradition, or in Taze, or any of those kinds of music modalities. There is a certain resonance that happens in our physical body that centers us quickly. It's a way of kind of calming the mind quickly, right? So we would immediately go into that space, and then we would go sit at the tables and we would have dinner together. There would be someone who would share they would talk about some meaningful thing that had happened in their life, or some lesson they wanted to offer. Then Emily would offer a response or a reflection to that. So there was a bit of a dialogue. The tables, then we could all talk to each other about what we had just discussed and what it meant for us. Then we would serve each other communion, bread and grape juice that was on the table. We would sing again, and then we would all, give thanks. There would be a benediction, and then we would get up and do our dishes. And then we would head out. But this idea of just sharing a simple, beautiful meal together, and talking about the things of the soul that matter, to the human life, and each one of us, and the burdens that we might be carrying, and the celebrations we might hold. It's a lovely way to actually be real with one another. So dinner churches now are all over the place. A lot of congregations do them, but it's a wonderful way to build community and connection. St. Andrew's Episcopal Church had such an interesting experience. I worked with them a number of years ago. So you may remember them from the news. They were just going along, living their lives. And Ron DeSantis decided to load about 88 migrants onto an airplane and flew them to Martha's Vineyard. And they landed at about, I think it was about 7 o'clock at night one day, absolutely unannounced. And they were dumped at the airport. There was no warning. There was no one there to greet them. They were just literally standing on the tarmac, not knowing what to do. There happened to be one woman who was working late, and saw them standing out there, went out to ask some questions, and realized the crisis that they now had on their hands. So she immediately made a call to the pastor of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, who for the last few years, having gone through their visioning process, had determined that one of the most important things that they could do was to build deep, trusting connections between the social service organizations on Martha's Vineyard, so that there was a real joined up way of dealing with what for them was a housing crisis, affordable housing crisis in the area. So when they called the pastor, he immediately, because those friendships and those relationships with these organizations had been built over time, there was a deep sense of trust between all of them. They, within 2 hours, mobilized all of the support that was needed to deal with that crisis at the moment. So they housed 88 people all of a sudden. I mean, church members came, other church congregations came, a whole slew of attorneys showed up to help with the documentation challenges. Food was brought. I mean, just everything you could imagine that was needed there was mobilized within a 2 hour time span. Now, that would not have been possible if St. Andrew's Episcopal Church had not taken responsibility for building a sense of trust among a network of partners and organizations. They didn't know that this was going to happen, but they knew something like it could, that there might be something that would come up that they wanted to be prepared for. And they were thinking actually it would be a climate related issue, but they were able to mobilize because they had the relational currency in place. So, I mean, what would it look like if Hennepin took responsibility for building the kind of network that could be mobilized in a crisis, or mobilized at some scale? not because it wants to mobilize it, but because it realizes there's a responsibility of holding friendship and of trusted relationship between entities and organizations that then enables quick action. Because as Adrienne Maree Brown teaches us in Emergent Strategy, that change moves at the speed of trust. So this kind of action only happens when there's a trusted network of relationships in place. Your Dignity Center is a great possible platform for something like that to take root. This is Middle Collegiate Church in New York City. Middle is the very first nonprofit that was ever formed in the United States. It's their EIN number is 00000001. So it's a really historic, amazing congregation. It's currently pastored by the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, who you can see on your screen. This is a picture actually of their sanctuary before it burned down. It burned down, I think it was in 2020, that they had a terrible fire that actually destroyed the whole building. Today, we might say that that was a blessing because they're now able to build a building for 2024. But they're an incredibly diverse, incredibly dynamic congregation. They're not huge. They're probably about 150 people that show up, but they've built a national membership, if you will. So you and I could tune in to Middle Collegiate and be a part of many of their different programs that they offer. But one of the interesting things they did a number of years ago was they created a connected nonprofit that was a non-faith-based nonprofit called the Middle Project. And through that nonprofit, they offer programming, resources, and in this case, what I'm showing on the screen, this Revolutionary Love image, is a national conference that they hold every year to curate conversations on the issues that matter from the progressive Christian perspective, or maybe I shouldn't even say Christian, maybe spiritual perspective. And so they have, they're based in Manhattan, so they have access to big names. But they bring these folks together, they host this conference, and it really is a way of trying to shape the imagination and the conversation at a national scale about some of the biggest issues that are facing our culture right now, or facing humanity right now. So, I think that kind of conversing, that kind of helping each other learn and think differently is something that we need in more and more places. Hennepin is, again, another exceptionally, your campus is beautiful. Your building is spectacular. What if you all wanted to curate national conversations around issues that really matter, that people would fly in for, that this would be a destination, that maybe the new South by Southwest kind of experience that would help us think, that would help us have civil dialogue, that would help us be more creative than the kind of meme reality that we are in our social media based I don't know, dystopia. Is, at least for me. You all may have a different perspective on that. I wanted to show you these just as an example. You all already have, you all lean into the arts already in extraordinary ways, in inspiring ways. I wondered, and maybe you do this, but I wondered about like poetry riff-offs and, letting artists come and teach about their work, or holding sculpting classes, or so instead of just displaying art, which these pictures actually are showing, you all already do that in beautiful ways. How can we level that up? How can you lean even further into the arts in a way that invites people to actually, the common people, to actually play with their own artistry? Because what we know about healing of the soul is that it comes through our embodied practices of being creative, of having the freedom to discover these open spaces within us that remind us that we're connected and that we're co-creators with the spirit in that way. So again, you may already be leaning into that, but I wanted to offer it as kind of a provocative idea. This is Old South Church in Boston, Massachusetts. It is, I'm not sure the picture represents it very well, but it is a stunningly gorgeous building, much like yours. They are going big in on environmental actions, teachings, justice, etc. So knowing that you all also have a similar energy, I have about 15 other congregations that I recommend that you all connect with, but I pull out Old South Church because they're similar size. And they are channeling their people's activities in through action, advocacy, and study. And I think, you know, doing that at a scale that's inspiring, the kind of cathedral idea, or the creation collective idea that you all are embracing amongst yourselves here too. Now, bear with me, we have just a few more, and I know I'm just like throwing so much at you, but it's so fun. I just think, you know, churches are amazing places, and so many are doing such great things. So this is First Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, and they are a congregation that is full of business people. And most of these business people, or many of them, are early or semi-retired or just early in retirement. And they wanted to do something that gives back to the community. But for them, the impulse might have been something that felt more like charity work, where you just write a check and you know, tell people or you just say good luck with that, you know. And they wanted to do something more creative. So they partnered with a movement that's called the Epiphany movement to create what we call as a social enterprise initiative. And they work with between 8 and 12 projects a year. They've set up a fund to help social entrepreneurs who have ideas that would make the community stronger and more resilient, but are also self-sustaining in time. And then congregants with certain skills in certain areas offer their time for investing into the project. So there might be executive coaching that could be offered, or there might be financial advisors who help them build solid business plans. Some people are lending their networks of connections on behalf of these projects to get people appropriately connected into the right spaces, etc. So again, with the competence that you all have in this congregation, what if we did something like this? Now I need to I actually have to stop sharing because I set the wrong setting. So let me just give one. I need to share the sound and optimize for video clip. We'll go right back to this, and then let's just watch a video clip that explains this, complete with a great Southern accent. So hold on just a second here. Hopefully you all can see it and hear it. Uh-oh, can you all hear anything?
Changemakers meet opportunity. Epiphany harnesses the power of small businesses to drive positive change. Launched in 2018, Epiphany is an incubator for entrepreneurial ideas. It's based on the belief that empowering entrepreneurs who seek to address social challenges can transform how we participate in God's mission in and for the world. Our goal is to find entrepreneurial solutions to our community's most pressing problems, to identify people who bring discipline, drive, and innovative thinking to bear, and to encourage those who see problems others would characterize as hopeless through a lens of opportunity instead. Our mission is clear: to fund and empower entrepreneurs with a vision for a better Atlanta.
All right, so sorry about the sound there at the beginning, but I think you kind of get the point. Now, First Pres didn't have to invent this whole structure. There's actually a nonprofit entity that works with congregations to set up these social enterprise hubs, if you will. And so they just partnered up and raised some money to help do seed capital into some of these projects. And then again, offer their personal expertise into that space. So they're on year 4 or 5 of that project, and it's gone great for them. Whoops, hold on. Let me see if I can get out of here. Okay, can you stand a couple more? Let me just keep geeking out on you. Full disclosure, this is a congregation I pastored for a lot of years. But that is Matt Laney, who is their new pastor, spectacular guy. And they are positioned, they're located in a neighborhood called Virginia Highland that happens to be practically in walking distance to Emory University, to the CDC, and to the Carter Center. So they're in this kind of sweet spot of, you know, kind of intellectual amazingness, right? And so they are working on, it's still in development, the Center for Wisdom Studies. Their sense is that people don't wake up and say, you know, gosh, I want to go to a church to learn about spiritual wisdom. Sadly, you know, because there's oh, you all are getting to see Harper. You know, there's such resistance to the brand of institutional religion. So this congregation's leaning into, well, what if we created a center for wisdom studies that could teach kind of the best of spirituality, not just in their case, not just Christianity, but they want to you know, offer the best of Buddhist psychology, and they want to offer yoga, you know, teachings of yoga and shamanic practices, and the wisdom traditions, the perennial wisdom traditions that, again, as a school of love, make people wiser, kinder, more compassionate, more at peace with themselves, and then hopefully more at peace with the world. So they're partnering with these institutions to build a curriculum, kind of a wisdom curriculum, if you will, that then people in the neighborhood can participate in. They'll offer them in sprints, so you're not signing up for your whole life. Although one part of it, if you want to make a really high investment into it, you can go through for a certificate, a certified experience, and really a kind of a deep dive into these practices. But you can also be a tourist in the program. You can sign up for, you know, a 6-week sprint on this, or study on this, or a 4-week this, or, you know, just sign up for a single experience. However you want to be a part of the Center for Wisdom Studies, that's an option for you. So it's a real investment into the neighborhood of people who want to learn from all of these incredible people who work in these institutions and spaces. And this gives the chance for that kind of relationship to take place there. This is Lord of Lutheran Church in Minnesota, and I want to just highlight for them. So one of the historic offerings that congregations played in the early formation of this country, and still in minority groups, particularly African American congregations today, historically and today, the church is a place where life services get offered. So a place where, for example, if you need mental health support, you can go there. If you need, like at Trinity UCC in Chicago, if you need a credit union, they have a credit union as part of their congregation. If you need health insurance, they have a way of helping you connect into a network of health insurance providers. If you you know, need dental support, there's a congregational dentist that will come and offer you discounted services. So very practical life things. If you need a financial advisor, there's a, you know, financial advisor available through the congregation. Now imagine if, as a value of being community, again, a school of love where we're trying to be more loving, kind, and compassionate, that we also could count on that community meeting us at our base needs of realizing that a lot of the suffering that we end up experiencing is caused because we don't have access to resources that keep us healthy and safe. So if a congregation could help provide some of that through their community, what a gift that would be to so many people, and to become known for that. So, okay, apparently that was my last one. I thought I had like 10 more, but we will stop there. That was a lot, right? I get excited about this and then probably go overboard. Um, and actually, if you haven't fallen out of your pews or your chairs, which I can't see because I'm just staring at a staircase here, then let me just offer one more idea. There's this congregation in Chicago called Urban Village Church. It's a United Methodist church, and they decided instead of building a single campus that was, you know, 250 to 500 people or whatever scale that they were going for, they actually decided that once a campus reaches about 100 people, that they then go start another community in another neighborhood, which is also an interesting idea because you remember from our last session that like 90% of congregations in the United States are 80 members or less. So this idea actually that we could actually be a scaled congregation, but have multiple campuses is another kind of provocative, like, what could we do? If there was Hennepin main campus and then Hennepin other campuses, and see what difference could be made in raising the standard of life for people living in the community all over the city. So, okay, I'm going to stop. I wonder what questions, responses, what idea was most interesting to you? What idea has occurred to you? Do you mostly need to take a nap? And Bill, we can't hear you. So if somebody's asking a question, I can't hear it.
Now you're muted, Cameron. Anyway, can
There you
hear
go.
me?
Yes.
Wonderful. This is Elizabeth. My question for you is, I'm full of many excitements and interests and passion right now. What's the next step for us as a congregation so that I know how I can put my voice in the stew?
Well, again, as I mentioned it earlier, so as a congregation, we're in this fun period of discernment I mean, you all could do a million things, but what are the things that that we could lean into that you have the sense would create that possibility of all wonder and transcendence? So what we're trying to discern is, let's think about the next 1 to 5 years, just to keep it in a reasonable window. What do you want to do with your one wild and precious life as a congregation? Where shall we go with all of this? And so if you've got thoughts and ideas, the easiest way to feed that back is to talk to a member of your vision team. And we're meeting regularly and kicking these ideas around. And then we'll have other opportunities for you all to get together in small groups and in town halls where you can, start to think some of these things through. But we're really in a creative moment where we're just trying to discern together what it is that you all are called to lean into here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cameron,
Yeah.
can you tell us where the Lord of Life Church is located in Minnesota? Maple Grove is the answer. We know the answer to that. Never mind. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
Cameron, my name's Nancy. I've been away for a little bit, but so I'm coming back into this process in the middle. I'm wondering, so maybe you talked about this already with the group, but what do you see as the roadblocks or obstacles that kept or could have kept, like all the congregations you shared with us, they were at a point of making decisions that could have gone many ways. Not that there's only one right way for them. maybe there is, I don't know. But how did they traverse those obstacles that you see? In particular, what may be called a failure of imagination?
Well, for coming into the middle of the process, you have caught right up. So that's a great question. Thank you. I think that it's true of all of our human institutions that the greatest obstacle is that poverty or failure of imagination, and then also a resistance to risk, to try. So what we're finding now increasingly with many of our institutions, again, institutional religion certainly being one, but not exclusively, is that more and more of us are resistant to change. And that's absolutely understandable given that, again, the rate of change that we're living through it's such a high level. But when we clamp down on our congregations and kind of make those the places that change never happens, or that we kind of hold on to a nostalgic past, that is a surefire way to send your congregation into a fast decline, and predicate its death. So it's this playful spirit, that's my motto is, if nobody's going to die, give it a try. If that's the spirit that we could adopt as a congregation, that opens up a kind of freedom of imagination that I don't know has ever been more important in congregational life than right now.
Anybody else? Cameron, I'm gonna walk over to Lori Sturdivant.
Cameron, hi, this is Lori. Thank you for a really good presentation and really inspiring us with so many good examples. Based on what you know about Hennepin's situation now, would you advise us to look for ways to build on our existing strengths? And a number of these examples would do that, would build on, for example, the Dignity Center and our Steeple People store. Would you advise us at this point to look that way? Or do you think we should be thinking about a departure from our past, something truly new and different?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's my answer is yes, to both. So again, if we can look at what your current strengths through that lens of, does this help me encounter God? Does this help me grow in my own spiritual maturation? And does it help me make this world a more just and generous place, and us collectively a more just and generous place? Then we should double down on those things, those strengths that you've got. But there may be a great number of things that you've inherited as part of being Hennepin Ave UMC that the previous generations gifted forward, but that are no longer feeding you all in the ways that it might have historically. And so if there are programs, priorities, policies that are in place because of nostalgia, we should wonder about letting those go. And you all should ask yourselves, is there a way to celebrate what has been gifted to you, but as you're looking forward, let's take forward only what you need we need to lighten the load, if you will, of what it takes to run this place and to be this community, so that you do have space for the opportunity of new possibilities in front of you. So it's more art than science, and it's a holding of in balance the things that have brought you this far, letting go of the things that you don't need to carry forward anymore, and then adding in the things that deepen that sense of connection to the sacred and connection to creation. That is what most human souls are deeply longing for at this point, particularly from our congregations.
I'm walking over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's Elizabeth. The beauty of how this is all coming together, the timing is just exquisite, in my opinion, because the newly elected governance board will be putting together principles for how it is our ministry will be guided. And so to be able to incorporate the things that you have shared as we go about that work, and that's how we sort what it is we give energy, prayer, time, passion to. It's not an exclusive list, but it's a grounding and a stating of values. And I'm so grateful that this conversation is taking place not only at the governance board table, but with this larger process and the creation collective. It's just, it feels like, okay, God, we're in the middle of cooking up something really delicious.
Anything else for Cameron while we've got her? Oh, here we go. I'm walking.
Hi, Karen. This is Nancy again. So the congregation, I think California, the first one you showed us with all the C words that had the wheels of,
So
it had like all the innovative
Way
ones
collective.
and then all the other wheel, coercive, yeah. Is that kind of thing, I imagine they came up with that in and through an involved process, but like to borrow some of these things, what kind of trademarks are on some of these developments?
yeah, I would imagine a conversation with Tim Burnett, who's their pastor, is all that's needed. Particularly in their case, they've created such an extraordinarily unique and authentic community that that it would be flattering to them if you wanted to build a relationship and a connection to what they've done and are doing. What would not be great is if a congregation just took their framework and thought they understood it and then applied it in surface ways. Because again, part of the brilliance of what they've done is that it's deeply integrated into each person. They've really spent time talking about this and living these ways. They're called the Way Collective. That creates again this kind of contemplative feel to it. So if you're up for that, which I wish every congregation was up for that, so I would love to facilitate that connection for you all and see where it goes. That's what you would want to sign up for, is to deeply understand what it means to form an authentic Christian culture, you know, that's really, really mindful of that in a way that a lot of congregations never quite get to. But they're super fun people. I mean, you all are too. I don't work with people who aren't fun, so it would be fun to connect you.
Anything else? Cameron, thank you for your time. The congregation has now, over the last 2 Sundays, had the opportunity to experience the care with which you express yourself, your organization, the clarity and the content of what you've presented to us. They understand that we're in good hands, and I want you to know that too.
It's been great to be with you all.
Enjoy your Sunday. You're free.
Great. Thank you all.
I do want to say before you click, oh, she's gone. I do want to say that our goal in this is next time she does a webinar, next time we want you to know that the next time you do a webinar or similar, that you'll have a hard time keeping us off your example list. We want you to know that.
Good. Game on.
Thank you.
Very good. I like that challenge.
Thank you. Okay. This is an opportunity where we can do a breakout for the folks online, and we can have a conversation here. And I leave that up to you because it's a beautiful day, and you have your own things, so you can grace each other or grace the world or both. Thank you for your time.